lesson on a Thursday evening where we will be studying this week's portion. This week we study the portion of Emor. The portion of Emor begins in the book of Leviticus, chapter 21, verse 1, on page 780 in the Gutnik Chumash, if you have it. So tonight I would like to share with you a few points about this week's portion, lessons to life. I begin with just a summary of what this portion is talking about, and then we will delve into some specific points. The beginning of the portion discusses priests, Kohens. The Kohen is restricted to defiling themselves spiritually by coming in contact with a dead corpse or under the tent with a dead corpse. And there are many other restrictions. Also the restrictions who he can marry and the lifestyle that he can conduct himself. The laws continue speaking about the high priests, restrictions which are more restrictive than a regular priest. Then the Torah lists all the major holidays that we celebrate throughout the year, beginning with Passover, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Actually, this is the portion mostly read throughout the year because on every holiday, we read from this week's portion about the holiday because it's the portion that deals specifically about the requirements of sacrifices during those holidays. Finally, towards the end of the portion, there is an incident in the desert when a man is violating a Jewish law. The Jewish people didn't know what to do with him. Then God instructs Moses what kind of punishment should be meted out to him. So the first point I want to share with you is on page 787 or chapter 22, verse 20. Chapter 22, verse 20. I'm going to read the verse first, explain it, and then go a little deeper. The Torah tells us, verse 20, it is prohibition against offering blemished animals. We know the Jewish people can offer a sacrifice to God as an offering, either to atone for a sin or as a thankful offering or during a holiday. But God makes certain restrictions about the type of animals and the age of the animal, and in addition that the animal must have no blemish. Verse 20 reads the following: you should not consecrate any animal that has a blemish as an offering, because it will not be accepted favorably by God for you. 21 reads the next, continue on the same topic. If a man brings a peace offering to God from cattle or from flocks to fulfill a vow or a pledge, it should be perfect in order to be accepted by God. It should not have any blemish in it. So 2 verses teach us the same idea, that when a man brings a sacrifice to God, an offering to God, it must be free of any blemish. What's the reason? So we have one reason, the Sefer HaChinuch, the book that lists all the 613 commandments and try to give us reasons for any mitzvah that there is a reason. It gives us the following reason. You can find it in classic questions. Sefer HaChinuch writes the following. Since the basic purpose of the sacrifices is to arouse a person's thought and feelings towards God, it follows that the animal which he offers need to be perfect. Otherwise, his inspiration will be incomplete. Sefer HaChinuch said, the sacrifice represents the person's connection and bringing himself closer to God. If the person is bringing a blemished animal, he is not totally connected with God because parts of the animal are not complete or not perfect, and therefore it lacks some of the connection to God. I should share with you that there are different categories of blemishes, and that's the topic I want to speak about. And they are a Jewish person bringing a cattle without free of blemishes, a non-Jew who brings offerings to God, and a Jew who brings an offering to God not from cattle, but from the birds, dove, turtle dove. What the category of blemishes varies. And here is the summary of the categories. When a man, a Jew, brings an offering to God, it must be free of any blemish, even the smallest blemish must be, the animal is inspected thoroughly, and even a cut in the lips or a scratch in the ear deems the animal unfit for an offering to God. When it comes to a non-Jew, as one can read on verse 25, you can read that God says we can accept an offering from a non-Jew to the temple. However, the level of blemish is a little bit different, where only missing a limb is unfit. But if there is a small imperfectness in the animal, it can still be offered to God. What is not to be accepted is if it limbs missing an ear, missing an eye, missing a leg, then we are not accepting it. When a man brings a bird, a dove, or a bird as an offering to God, again, the level of imperfectness is lower than a cattle, and the animal might have, the bird can have some imperfectness. However, missing a limb deems the bird unfit for the altar, and it's not kosher. One can ask, why are there various degrees of blemishes that within the Jewish people you have cattle that must be very restricted and must be totally perfect without any imperfection? When it comes to dove or bird, then the quality is lowered, where some imperfectness are accepted. And when it comes to a non-Jew, even cattle can be imperfect but must have no body limb missing. I should also add a caveat that all these levels apply only before the temple was built. When the tabernacle at the time before, each person would bring an offering in their backyard or at a designated place in their camp. That's when the various levels apply. But once the tabernacle is built and the altar was erected forever as a place for offering to God, no imperfectness is accepted for a bird or for a non-Jew. But in idea, in theory, before the altar was erected, there were differences. The following is the Hasidic explanation, which I think is very powerful for us. The Rabbi, it's in the gray box on page 789. I will read part of it and then I will summarize. The Rabbi says, we can explain why a Jewish person must bring an animal which is totally devoid of blemish, whereas a non-Jew may offer a blemished animal if it is not lacking an entire limb. For, according to halacha, to Jewish law, a Jew is required to come to a deeper understanding of God's absolute unity than a non-Jew. Therefore, the Jew must offer an animal of a higher degree of perfection than the non-Jew. So the sacrifice will assist him in reaching the more profound awareness of God that is expected of him. Says the Rebbe, the level of connection to God between a Jew and a non-Jew is different. A Jew is required to follow God's commandments that are many, many more than a non-Jew, because he needs to have a much stronger bond and connection to God. If the animal represents the human and the bond between the human and God, the bonding must be a perfect one so that it makes a much stronger bond. Now the Rebbe explains, similarly, there are different levels of perfection within an animal sacrifices themselves. Why? Jewish law is more stringent in the case of an animal offerings, which are typically a rich man's type of sacrifice, than the bird offerings, which are typically offered by the poor man. Here we see once again that the Torah demands a higher level of perfection from those who are more capable. The Rabbi says that bird, dove, turtle dove, and birds offering to the altar on the altar is usually a poor man's offerings. Those who could not afford a bull or a cattle, a goat or a sheep, and therefore, the Torah allows some level of imperfectness for that bird to be there, and still it can be bought on the altar because a rich man's capability are much stronger, much bigger, and therefore he can afford to buy a cattle, and therefore the requirement of this person is far greater than the requirement of the poor man who is busy earning a living. I think what the point that the Torah tells us is that both people, all people, a Jew, a non-Jew, a rich or a poor, all want to connect and bond with God. Yet, each one's level varies based on their capability and the demand that they can fulfill. So that if two people fulfill one mitzvah, the way God looks at it is totally different from the point of view of the person's personal conditions and upbringing and level of knowledge, etc. At the same time, when we see someone who we might criticize or look down upon because he's not in the level of doing that we are, the sacrifices teach us that a poor man or a non-Jew, the demands are totally different, and if they do what is required of them, it is accepted completely by God, just like the rich man's cattle that is accepted totally. So a Jew brings a cattle that has imperfection, it will be rejected. A Gentile brings the same animal with imperfectness, it will be totally accepted because the demands is varies from person to person. The same is between a rich man and a poor man. I want to move on to the next point that I wanted to share with you, and that is on page 791, uh, chapter 22, verse 32. Chapter 22, 32, God says the following: You shall not desecrate my holy name by violating my commands intentionally. You should be willing to give up your life rather than transgress my commandments so that my name should be sanctified. From among the children of Israel, I am God who sanctified you, who is taking you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. On the condition that you sanctify my name, I am God. Here is a commandment in this week's portion to sanctify God's name, which means there are three cardinal sins, namely idolatry, worshiping other gods, adultery, having a forbidden relations, incest, bestiality, or forbidden relation with a married woman or a relative. The third one is murder. Any one of those three cardinals that a person is forced to follow, they must sanctify God's name and stand and say, I'm sorry, I will not disobey my God, and I'm willing to sacrifice my life and give them up for God. This is the mitzvah, we call it Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify God's name in the world, showing the universe that God's commandments are what life is all about. And by Jewish law, people who sanctify God's name are martyrs. We know the Holocaust, those who perished during the Holocaust, or anybody whose life is taken due to the fact that he's being Jewish. We had a rabbi in Muncie who just died, unfortunately. In Israel, there are soldiers who sanctify their life by defending a fellow Jew. They are martyrs, and according to Jewish law, as Maimonides quotes, there is no greater standing before God than those martyrs, like Rabbi Akiva, etc. But there is a debate which one is the more perfect way or the higher level of sanctification. The one who is actually giving up their life and show the universe that God's is more important than life, or those whom are willing to give up their life, but a miracle happens and they are spared. As we know, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, we know Daniel, we know Abraham. There were many, many people up to our generation who were willing to give up their life, and miracles happen. During the Israeli wars in Six-Day War, Yom Kippur War, there are plenty of people, soldiers can share with you miracles that cannot be explained. How come they survived? And maybe that's when God's name is sanctified to a greater degree, where God shows that he's there to save his people. I only share with you that there are two opinions. According to Maimonides, the sanctification by giving up life and giving life as a gift to God is a greater way to sanctify God. According to the Torat Kohanim, another great commentator, it is far greater to try and find a way for God to perform a miracle, because if God makes a miracle and we survive the ordeal, it is a far greater way of showing God's sanctification in the universe. According to the Rabbi explained that Rashi, our favorite commentator, actually combines the two. Rashi, according to the Rebbe, says that when one is willing to give up their life and not rely on a miracle, and a miracle did happen, he is, so to say, considered as if he has given up his life. And at the same time, God performed miracles where God shows that he rules the universe, and he can stop anybody trying to hurt his children or his favorite ones. And now I want to move on to the next point. And I want to share with you the following story as an introduction to the point. But the point that I want to share with you is, you may find it on page 798. And the chapter is 23, verse 22. I actually want to read it, then I'll share with you a story. I'm reading 23:22. When you reap the harvest of your land, you should not completely remove the corner of your field during your harvesting, since this should be left to the poor. Nor should you gather the individual stalks of your harvest that have fallen. You should leave them for the poor man and the convert. I am God, you God. So we know there are many people who unfortunately didn't make it through the pandemic of the COVID-19. There was a story of a man, a father of 7 children, who fell ill to the coronavirus. And after 7 weeks, he survived and he was returned home by an ambulance. When he arrived in Crown Heights, they made a big party and a big celebration when he came out of the ambulance. And of course, when he walked home, he was greeted by 7 children and wife. His wife was interviewed by a Chabad media outlet, and they asked her, of course, she was extremely elated after 7 weeks not being there for Passover, not knowing if the man will ever come back, they will be able to see him. He returned back home safely. They were extremely happy. But they asked the wife, how was she able to cope with life, especially the financial aspect, taking care of 7 children for about 7 weeks, six and a half weeks, without the support of the husband working? She turned to the reporter, to the interviewer, and she said, you wouldn't believe the kind of people I live among. Everybody rushed to my aid. My grocer phoned me and said that an anonymous donor He's taking care of all my shopping bills, and I can come in and shop for Passover. I can buy as much as I need, and he will take care of the bill. People pushed in envelopes under our door with cards and checks and and cash. Then people came in, families stopped by with obviously with the social distancing, delivering toys for the kids to play, looking around to see how they can help. She says that not only nothing was missing financially and in that aspect, but actually the show of love and care that was displayed extremely changed the attitude of the family, and she was forever going to be thankful. The type of tzedakah, kindness, that is prevalent among Jews is that there are different kinds of tzedakah. There is actually, Maimonides lists 7 levels of tzedakah. The highest level of tzedakah is to teach someone so they can earn a living on their own. As the phrase goes in English, give a fish to a man and you fed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you fed him forever. That's according to Rambam, this first highest step. Next, level number 2 is what we call matan baseter, a giving without knowing the identity of the giver, and the giver has no idea who the recipient is. And then you have a third level where the recipient knows, the giver knows, but the recipient has no clue. And it goes on. Matan baseter, giving in quietness where the recipient has no clue who is the giver, is the highest level of giving tzedakah, other than training someone to find a job. And I think that directly relates to the point I just made. Why? Because as I mentioned before, this week's portion talks about the holidays. And then smack in the middle, between the holiday, come the very strange request that when you harvest your field, do not harvest the entire field, but leave a corner for the poor to come and gather. And when you have fallen stock, do not pick it up, leave it for the poor. One can ask, what is this mitzvah doing here? We just read about the mitzvah of Passover. We read about the mitzvah of Shavuot. The next verse is about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot. In between, it's like stacked in the middle between the 2 holidays, the 5 holidays, right in the middle. God is commanding us to do tzedakah in the mitzvah. We call it pe'ah. Pe'ah is corner in Hebrew, and leket. Leket is when you forgot some on the floor, stalks. Do not gather them. The Rabbi adds more. The Rabbi is asking, if you want to talk about tzedakah, we read last week in Kedoshim, we read about the mitzvah. The same mitzvah appears already before. And in the book of Deuteronomy, we read about patoach tiftach, you must open up your hand. Tzedakah appears in several places. What does it take? Why does it appear here between the holidays? I'm going to read to you how Rashi addresses it, and how the Rebbe applies the point that I think is very powerful. Rashi says, where is it? Rashi says, Rabbi Abdimi said, I need to find it. Rabbi Abdimi in the name, it's not in English, I'm reading to the Hebrew and translating on verse 22 on Rashi. Rabbi Abdimi in the name of the son of Rabbi Yosef says, why the Torah puts it in the middle of the holidays, Pesach ve'atzeret, Passover and Shavuot on the right, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur and Sukkot on the left, to teach us that anyone who gives tzedakah and lives in the harvesting for the poor man by as much as needed, it is considered as if he built a temple and brought sacrifice over it. And because the holidays are special times to bring sacrifices, God reminds us that doing tzedakah is the way just like bringing sacrifices. When I help the poor, I am bringing sacrifices. But the question, as the Rebbe points out, why particularly these two? And the Rebbe's explanation is that usually when a man gives tzedakah, he has a full choice about whom he chooses to give. Everybody can have his favorite charity. Everybody can have his favorite college, yeshiva, synagogue, members that he wants to assist. And it is perfectly right. So when the Torah says, Patoch, tiftach, open up your hands, the Torah says, do not keep a blind eye and you must be helping the poor. The Torah is referring to me taking something that's my cash or goods and helping someone. But no one can take away my right for choosing whom I want to give. I can pick my favorite poor beggar, my favorite Levite. There is Maaser and Truma, but Jewish law, the priest, the Kohen or Levi is not allowed to enter the field or the vineyard to assist, so I can give it to him. It's prohibited because I should be free with my choice to whom, which Kohen, which priest should receive my maaser, my tithe, my contribution, etc. However, there are times when God says you should not make that choice. You should allow for people who are needy to receive their help without you choosing whom you're going to help. And that's why this is a far greater mitzvah when you don't even know, you have not only have no say, but you don't even know who is the recipient. That's why the Torah, and that's the mitzvah of leaving a corner in the field or leaving the stalks that fell while I harvest without picking them up and letting the poor come in the field in the afternoon when I'm gone and picking them up. The poor or the convert, a stranger who is visiting, because there is no way for me to be able to say to someone, you cannot come in, it's not for you. It is free for all. They don't know the name of the owner of the field, and I don't know who picked it up. This is the perfect Matan Baseter, and that's why the Torah chose to put it between the holidays, because that's the best, the highest level of tzedakah, where there is total disengagement between the recipient and the donor. And that's why the Torah said, the Torah does not say give it to the poor. If you read the text, it says, lo telaket, do not gather, le'ani v'lager ta'azov. Ta'azov in Hebrew means let go. Let go of it for the poor beggar. When I see a poor homeless and I'm afraid that he's going to use it for drugs or for booze, I can say, I'm sorry, I don't want to assist you because I want my money to go for a good cause. But there are times we need to keep a blind eye and say, if someone wants it, I don't have to be picky. I have to be able to help. And that's the time when the Torah is talking about holidays. When you celebrate, make sure you make someone else's happy without making a choice, without choosing who you're going to help and a particular individual. And that's why the Torah is referring to this mitzvah with ta'azov otam, let go of it. You have no say who should receive, because once you become picky, if you restrict someone, you're actually committing a sin. It's not the fulfillment of the mitzvah is not there, just like Matan Baseter. There is a short story, I have 1 minute or less. Rabbi Zusha of Anipoli, he's a friend of the Alter Rebbe who composed the Tanya. Rabbi Zusha of Anipoli is one of the two who wrote a letter of recommendation on the Tanya, because he was a holy man, and the Alter Rebbe wouldn't publish it unless two holy men would agree, and he was one of them. There was a businessman who loved Rabbi Zusha, and he would travel to Rabbi Zusha and make a contribution to assist him with his needs. And he saw great blessings in his business. He was very successful, and he attributed to the contribution he made for Rabbi Zusha. One day, he came to visit the rabbi, and the rabbi was not in town. He asked people, where is the rabbi? And they told him he also has a rabbi, the Magid of Mezrich, who's his Rebbe. He was a disciple of the Mezrich Magid, and he would travel to visit him once in a while. And the businessman said, what, my Rebbe has a Rebbe? He must be much holier, so let me help my Rebbe's Rebbe. I am sure as a businessman, he figured he will be much more successful. So instead of helping Reb Zusha, he started helping the Mezrich of Magid, the Magid of Mezrich. And unfortunately, his business started falling down and he realizes that he made a mistake. So he returned back to Reb Zusha and he said, I'm sorry. I thought my idea was to help you, Rabbi, so God's help would be, blessing would be greater. But the opposite happened. What have I done wrong? And Reb Zusha turned to him and he says to him, your analogy is correct, but the foundation is incorrect. And let me tell you why. He says to him, as long as you gave tzedakah, you help a rabbi, you help a righteous man to assist the poor, to pay for the synagogue expenses and the study of Torah, without contemplating how holy is he, how special is he. God says he is kind to a fellow man. I will be kind to him too. And that's why God blessed you. But as soon as you figure there is somebody else that's much holier than Reb Zusha, you started using your mindset about calculating how to use your money best. God started thinking about giving you the money, and he figured he can give it to someone else who can do a lot better with the money, and that's why your blessing had stopped. And the point is that even though we should have the right to choose our tzedakah target, who we help, we should verify it goes for the right cause. But there are parts of the tzedakah which should be matan baseter. Not only the recipient has no idea, but also the giver should not have any say, just helping someone who can benefit from it. And by doing so, we will be blessed by God also to give us from his hand directly, endlessly, without any boundaries. There are many other points to be shared in this week's portion, but my time is over. So I'd like to conclude here by wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom. I also want to remind you that tomorrow at 6:30, we will have a pre-Shabbat celebration. We'll sing together. I hope Steve will be there to help me with Mizmor LeDavid and with Yedid Nefesh and Lecha Dodi and Shalom Aleichem. And perhaps I'll be able to share some short Dvar Torah as well. I want to wish everyone Shabbat Shalom, and also remember there is a daily minyan at 8 o'clock on Zoom. Thank you and good Shabbos, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi. Thank you.
You're welcome. Be well.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.